Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 37 and 38. Once again, I do have YouTube channel membership and Patreon available if you'd like to help support the channel. And if you come in at the higher tier, you'll gain early access to videos in this series. But yeah, like I said, we're kind of going rapid fire through things here. Like I've been kind of teasing, this is the chapter where the Day of Black Sun happens. We actually get the eclipse. And by the end of this first chapter here, 37, the plan has happened and failed. And we're just, okay, wow, we are just going through this rapid fire. But what's going on here? And again, like I've been saying for a while now, the book is going like all the way through book 3. So not just Day of Black Sun, but also getting into the kind of finale territory. So kind of gives you a sense for what we're doing here. But we'll jump into 37 here. So yeah, the first day of the 8th month, it's finally here. And Jin is just thinking about the kind of whole situation here. The Fire Nation are in control of Ba Sing Se, but they've affected her life for much longer before that because she grew up in an era where, the war was still on, the Fire Nation was expanding even before the more recent stuff has happened. And now she's in the middle of all of this, doing this kind of relatively small and insignificant thing of trying to get a girl out of the grasp of the Dai Li, but Susu is the most important person in all the world to me. And now that I know about Juan's father, I know all about how this must have brought back memories of losing him too. And then she says, interestingly, if we make it out of this alive, I'll have to make it up to him somehow. In whatever way I can, I make myself that promise, of course. And then they hear about some gossip going around that many of the Dai Li agents have left the estate for a secret mission accompanying the Fire Nation envoy. So I think they're kind of roughly trying to just get across here the idea that the amount of Dai Li agents present has gone down because Azula kind of has taken, I guess, some of them with her. So that makes sense. So everything is kind of getting into position as all of this is kind of going on. They actually witness, of course, the Day of Black Sun finally kind of happen here as they kind of make their way into position. And, she's just noting that, like, as they start the mission properly, I would trust him with all my life if it comes to it. So they know the eclipse is coming. Everyone else seems like they maybe don't quite know. So there's a lot of distraction when it actually begins to happen. And it allows them to kind of sneak past people, get into position. But here's where they actually have to take out a bunch of guards. So Xuan kind of starts the kind of combat here. Sends stones to the feet of the soldier closest to us, wrapping him around the ankles. Enveloping them in special shoes. So it's kind of trapping their feet in earth. Jin puts the gag in their mouth with the earthbending kind of technique, of course, with the beads of earth. They then dispatch 2 more soldiers before a Fire Nation soldier kind of tries to call out the alarm, but everyone's kind of freaking out about the eclipse, so no one super notices. They take out 2 more guards, and then they manage to kind of quickly take out the Fire Nation guard, who begins to firebend at them, but because the eclipse has just happened, a puff of black smoke is all that comes out when he tries to firebend at them. So Xuan then is just kind of like, look, I'll hold these guys down, you go in, you get her out. So he's just kind of like making sure to keep his earthbending kind of in place so that the firebenders can't kind of break free of his earthbending. They note that like he's trained enough to where he could hold 4 down at once. So she's going to have to check each of the kind of bed chambers kind of one by one. First one doesn't work. In the second one, she finally finds Susu. But in a kind of shock moment here, it's all revealed to be a trap because Susu's there, but then behind the curtain in the room is another one of the Judys who kind of calls out for help, and then a Dai Li agent appears, and then more drop from the ceiling, and they've just been completely taken by surprise here that some of the information being passed around has led them astray. They sort of knew someone was kind of spying on them to a certain degree. So pretty quickly, Jin gets captured. Xuan comes in because Jin calls out for help. She tells him to run, not to come in and help, but he comes in to help. He tries to fight, but is quickly taken out because there's too many Dai Li agents there, and they're not able to take them by surprise. So Xuan gets encased in stone from the neck down, and they kind of compress it a little bit until finally they kind of admit defeat and are captured. So the chapter ends with the idea that, you know, the light begins to come back. The eclipse ends. The eclipse is done. Our chance is gone. We've failed. And it's just the craziness of just the whole incident happens in like one chapter, and it all seemed to be going so well. Too well, because, you know, the book sort of talks about the idea of like, was it a little bit too obvious that right as the eclipse was happening, which they technically knew about, of course, they got rid of all their kind of earth-bending kind of allies, the Dai Li agents, and only left firebenders there in kind of key defensive positions. It was a bit too smooth running, and it hasn't worked out. But as we go into 38, of course, they are in an initial prison, but they'll be moved pretty shortly. So, you know, the Judies are standing in front of them, flanked by Dai Li agents. One of the Judies notes that, you know, you were right, Inspector Heng. There are rebels who would take opportunity to instigate trouble. So it highlights that at least one of the Dai Li agents was aware that someone was going to take advantage of the eclipse to do something. So they had even kind of higher levels of security prepared for some sort of a infiltration-like thing overall. Susu, of course, is right there. So Jin again tries to appeal to her, but nothing seems to get through. So they're going to be taken to the dungeons for questioning, of course. So, yeah, Jin awakes in the dungeons down here. Obviously, everything is like, her hands are in metal cuffs. There's wooden cuffs as well. And they're making sure that basically, as an earthbender, she can't earthbend, you know, whatsoever. She's not in too bad of a situation, though. She has been kind of knocked out by kind of earthbending. But she's relatively good in comparison to Xuan, who is revealed to also be down here. And the description here is, he looks to be in rough shape. There's a slash across his cheek, bruises on his jaw, a red splotch under his mouth, and there are bloody marks all the way down his arm. And anyone who sees him does note that he's in pretty bad shape here. His arm is pretty badly injured, and he's just been beaten up quite heavily in comparison to Jin, of course. And he's able to talk here, you know, I'm fine, but it does feel like an ostrich horse stomped all over my body and then kicked me in the head several times for good measure. She tries to be like, hey, you should have run. He's like, no, I wouldn't have left you here. She tries to apologize for dragging him into this mess, but he says, no, I wanted to help. And they have this really interesting back and forth where he talks about how, you know, during the craziness of the initial takeover of Ba Sing Se, he notes, do you remember that day when you climbed down into my house after the invasion? Yeah, I admire you for it. You know, you kind of in a way prompted me into action. Helping you made me feel like I could at least do something instead of sitting and waiting for help to come. So she has inspired him with her kind of almost surprise, you know, dedication to doing anything that she can. And this prompts him into action. And she kind of notes that, you know, to think, you know, that day in the shop when we basically first met properly for the first time, who'd have thought we'd end up here? And then he's like, you know, I have something to confess, but I remember you from before that day. Like from when you were announced as the winner of the New Year's Scroll contest, the girl from the village. And we kind of reflect on sort of the fact that, yeah, they were in the same kind of class as each other for quite a while when she was more in her kind of keeping to herself phase. So there's that. Then they kind of get to talking about some more kind of personal things, you know, how she only went to the academy to make Gong Gong happy. He asked, you know, what did your father do? He was the village magistrate, the representative of the governor in that area, and notes that Gong Gong felt like the way the family was going on the up and up, that, hey, he was the magistrate, and then his granddaughter was going to become the governor next, basically. That's the way things were potentially heading. But then one of the guards kind of comes down to give them some food, and Jin asks for Xuan, like, hey, could you spare some medicine, or even a clean bowl of water and a cloth to clean him up. He does look at them and is like, okay, yeah, he kind of nods and he's going to get some stuff for them. So they're at least sort of caring for the prisoners here. It's not like absolutely awful situation, but they're still being held prisoner, obviously. So yeah, they have the food here. There's no utensils, of course, anything that can be used as weapons or anything like that. So she gets to basically kind of cleaning him off, because he's obviously got a pretty badly damaged arm, so he can't kind of really do it himself. It's too painful. And she's like, hey, during the invasion, which you just talked about, you helped me when I hurt my hands, kind of like crawling all over the place. I'm going to help you do the same here. So she gets to kind of clean off all of his kind of bruises, clean the blood off him, all that sort of stuff. And then we begin to kind of get a kind of slightly more intimate kind of aspect of this scene where she's cleaning off his face. She kind of notes that like he's quite like intensely kind of looking at her because they're really up close, and she's kind of like, oh, you close your eyes, and you know, she's kind of cleaning his face, and then she kind of remembers the way she's kind of feeling at this point in time, that like it's similar to kind of how she felt or wanted to feel during the date with Lee at the, you know, beside the firelight fountain, where I thought the romantic atmosphere meant everything would somehow fall into place, but I was with the wrong person. There's a feeling I've tried to dance around, to pretend it doesn't exist, but I feel the force of it hit me now as I look at Chuen. His bruised, beautiful face that I've grown accustomed to seeing every day. A leap of faith, just like my mother and my father. When they kissed, they knew. I leaned forward and pressed my lips against his. So she, for the second time in the book, she's the one to kind of take the kind of bold move of initiate the kind of kiss here. But the idea is that there's much more setup here, much more build up here. This is the right person. And we'll get the reaction to this in the next chapter, chapter 39. So super interesting kind of ending here where like the romance is kind of finally happening here. Maybe not the best kind of place for it here after the completely failed mission they're held in the kind of dungeon together, but you know, still they've had this growing connection over the last like however many chapters here, and I think they've built up to it kind of pretty nicely, like, especially in this chapter where like they address like some of their kind of history together, and the idea of she only really noticed him that day she ran into him at the shop, but he had noticed her before then, and that's kind of interesting as well. And kind of, you know, bringing back some of those elements again from earlier chapters about the date with Lee, and you know, her always wanting that kind of romance, kind of like her parents, and it's taken her a while, but actually Chuen is the one that should be with, of course. But yeah, I think the main takeaway from these two is just like, yeah, that 37, just the failure of everything. The eclipse comes and goes and it doesn't work. In the same way that a lot of stuff that happened during the eclipse didn't work out. Of course, the actual invasion didn't really work out, though Bumi, of course, got some decent stuff done, which is interesting. But yeah, you see that, you know, where do we go from here? They're in prison. How do they get anything done from here? Surely this is just the situation that they're in until the war comes to an end and they're freed. That's what you maybe initially kind of think in your head. But there's other characters in the book and stuff like that. There's other dynamics going on and things that, you know, you don't know the full scope of. And what's going to be super interesting as we go forward is the idea of, yeah, we're highlighting that like the Silver Fangs are kind of basically disbanded, but they're kind of on an individual basis, kind of still helping everyone out. This is going to come back into play a little bit more, in that the reason in a way the Silver Fangs exist is for these crazy moments like this when they need an organization like that to try and help and fix things. So still some very interesting stuff to happen, and it's not just the prison story for the entire rest of the book. There's some very interesting elements still to come out in the last, you know, how many chapters are left? It's like I think it's 11 chapters left. I think it goes up to 48, and then there's an epilogue chapter after that. So interesting. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this. Finally, a proper kind of romantic scene between Jin and Chuen. but also the failure of the mission overall. What were your thoughts on the way things suddenly turned on their head very quickly in these couple of chapters? But yes, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.